welcome to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. This is episode 98. We are just a couple episodes away from 100 here on one of the most popular podcasts of the Pokemon trading card game. I'd like to say most, but honestly, I don't really look at the numbers that much. I just have fun and talk to you all in the YouTube comments, on Twitter, in the Discord servers. Anyways, really appreciate you being here for this podcast episode. And you may be, especially you audio-only listeners, being like, this is a little weird. Where's Gyroshan? Well, I hate to say this, but Gyroshan was feeling a little bit ill. He has come down with a bug of some sort. He's feeling a little sick, and the guy works real hard, and we were going to record, but honestly, he's just not feeling it. So I'm not going to make him do this. Well, we got a lot to talk about today when it comes to the Pokemon trading card game, because there was a lot of events that happened lately. 3 different regionals to be exact, and there's a little bit more news coming along the ways. But before we get into Perth, Lille, and also Secaucus regionals, we got to talk about a couple things, including reading off the 5-star review as always. I want to say it's the 97th 5-star review, but we didn't start reading the 5-star reviews right away because, well, episode 1, we didn't have any reviews because it was the... Anyways, this one is going to come from CNDJXIXKS. They left this wonderful review on Apple iTunes. That's where we read these from most of the time. Sometimes we'll drop in the YouTube comments, or someone will send us a nice DM on Twitter at MetapodTCG. But anyways, this one is short, sweet, simple, and to the point, because we got to get going talking about the different events, the different deck lists, the different changes of the standard meta in the Pokemon trading card game. This lovely review, its title is just 3 thumbs up emojis, just 3 thumbs up in this 5-star review. Caption, love it. That's it. And that is all that is. Send the tweet right there. And that was a lovely review. Let us know your thoughts as well, and definitely rate us whatever you think, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I guess you can leave a like if you enjoy this podcast. But anyways, let's get to the news. Let's get into the meat and potatoes, the real reason why all of you are here. Now, just a heads up, Astral Radiance is releasing later this week. It's the newest expansion of the Pokemon trading card game. At the time that this video releases, this podcast episode releases, you could probably find it at your local card shops. If you are unaware, card shops that do things like pre-release events, things like that, they are able to sell the products early upon release. Usually the big retail stores like Target, Walmart, Meijer, they're supposed to release the card products this Friday, but the card shops, in order to gain an advantage, so then people come to their store and things like that, if they hold a certain amount of pre-release events and maybe a couple other qualifications that I don't know about fully, because, well, I don't own a card shop. I just have bookshelves that you may see in the back. They are allowed to start selling early, and in my experience, I've gotten product as early as Monday of release week. So when you listen to this podcast, if you go out and you look for some Astral Radiance at your local card shops, you'll probably be able to find some, hopefully. Pokemon products has been much easier to get as of lately, so I assume that you'll be able to. And usually during that time, there's a little bit of waiting for when you get your product early from the card shops and you want to redeem the codes online, start opening the packs, and start playing some Astral Radiance standard decks. But usually in the Pokemon trading card game online client, the current online client that we use right now in order to practice and play, usually you have to wait until Friday. Usually it's like Friday at noon, I believe, but it has been announced recently. This was a couple weeks ago, but we actually didn't really talk about it. This was posted on the Pokemon TCGO forums page. You can get a lot of news sometimes, patch notes as well, and different things of that nature in the forum. So sometimes we go over there, but they announced a couple weeks ago that Astral Radiance will become available in the game earlier than usual with Pokemon new releases and expansions. So at 12 p.m. ET, Eastern Time, 12 p.m. ET, 9 p.m. on the Pacific Coast, or wherever you are in the world that converts to, the Pokemon Trading Card Game Online Game Client Downtime begins to deploy the version 2.89.0 game update. What that basically means, they're putting Astral Radiance in the game. That is essentially when that is. That downtime is so then they can get the newest release going and up. And so then approximately 3 p.m. Eastern Time, this is usually how it goes, 3 p.m. Eastern Time approximately, the online game client downtime ends, and you will be able to update your client online, whether that's mobile or PC or whatever have you. And in there, you'll be able to open up your Astral Radiance booster packs, open the cards, you know, all of that stuff, all of the code cards that are available right now will be able to work. And I don't know, though, if you'll be able to use your currency in the game, like with your coins, to buy it in the shop. It looks like actually that is going to be until Friday. So unfortunately, if you are a free-to-play player, like many people are who play the Pokemon trading card game online, you're not going to be able to open up Astral Radiance booster packs with your in-game currency, your coins and stuff, until Friday, May 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Or I'm sorry, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time. But this is, I believe, the first time, at least since I can remember, that Astral Radiance is coming earlier in the week. So very excited about that. Super excited to be able to test things out early. I actually don't have any codes. I gave them away in the video where I opened up an Astral Radiance Elite Trainer box. So I don't have any codes for Astral Radiance, but that's okay. I'll figure it out somehow. And if you want to check out Astral Radiance, maybe before you go out and buy stuff, whether that's buying codes or physical products, we actually have some videos opening product early. The Pokemon Company was so graciously sent us a ETB and a booster box to open up, and allowed us to open it up for the podcast. So thank you so much to them. And then we also, the last episode, the 97th episode of the Metapod podcast, I'm wearing the same outfit as I had last week. Anyways, we had a 2-hour long set list review podcast episode. So if you really want the nitty gritty of what Astral Radiance is, etc., go check out our previous episodes, and then also the YouTube channel to be able to see what exactly is in Astral Radiance. Is it worth it? What are the cards that you should be looking for? Buying as singles even. But we got to get on to the news. The results of the wonderful and glorious events that are happening right now, the IRL events that are happening. And there were 3 of them, as I mentioned, this past weekend. 3 events, including Perth, Lille and Secaucus regionals. Perth in Australia, Lille, I don't know how to pronounce it actually. It's French, it's in France, but that's gonna be my guess. And then Secaucus, my favorite country, New Jersey. I'm just kidding. I know it's not a... Anyways, there are events that were listed. There were definitely a lot of players. There were 85 players at Perth. Australian events usually also smaller, and there were two other events going on at the same time. So of course, it was going to be smaller. Lille had 367 players in standard, and then Secaucus had 497, which you may think that's a little bit low considering Indianapolis had over 1,000 players at that regional. But it was all over Twitter the night before. If you're in the Pokemon TCG Twitter, you may be well aware that there was a lot of flights canceled. There was a lot of people who had to back out last second because they just couldn't get to Secaucus. Flights were canceling. They were stuck in different cities. You know, tried to go by bus, train, car, whatever, last second. A lot of people didn't feel like it was worth it, you know, with the adjusted travel plan. So there were a lot of people that missed out, but there were still a great amount of people that played in that, and it was still a very, very competitive event. And we're going to go over the different decks that did well, what we saw in these three metas in the same weekend, and kind of some of the cool things about them. And the first one that we're going to talk about is Perth. We're going to talk about the Perth Regionals. Matthew Burris won it with Arceus Inteleon, and it wasn't the only Arceus deck in top 8 or even top 10. There were actually 8 different Arceus variants within the top 10 of the Perth regional results. And on top of that, even I think 6 of the top 10, if I just counted very fast correctly, 6 of the top 10. So there was 8 Arceus variants. 2 of them were Arceus Inteleon, and 6 of them were Arceus Beedrill. So Arceus Beedrill having a very significant impact on this event specifically. And 4th place overall, Mervin Chang. Hopefully I said that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. Played Mew VMAX, the only Mew in top 8. There were only 2 Mews in top 16. The other one, Gerard Paxton, getting 16th overall, and then 7th place overall, Aaron Vanderkolk playing Malamar Inteleon. So we'll talk about a couple of these different decks right here, but also the one thing that I want to note, I don't know where the list is. I haven't seen it, but Stonejourner VMAX got 15th. So that is really, really cool. When 4-2-1, we know that fighting types are kind of at a slight advantage, you know, being ones that hit weakness on Arceus. And you know what? Stonejourner doesn't get hit by weakness of Mew VMAX. So maybe something is in the works. Maybe some people will work on it. I don't know. I hope Stonejourner gets broken because I love Stonejourner. It's one of my favorite Galar Pokemon. But we're going to take a look at Matthew Burris's winning list. Now, Matthew did say that they beat 3 Arceus B decks in the top 8 matches that they played. Both top 8, top 4, and the finals match all were against Arceus B opponents. So you could say at this point that if you're afraid of Arceus Bs, and that's the #1 deck that you're afraid of right now, this list probably has a good matchup at this point to it, although there's a little bit more skill that goes on and then a little bit of variant. Anyways, this is a pretty standard list for the most part, especially when you talk about the things that people were talking about teching as well. So my screen is covering it if you're watching the video version, but over here, right next to my camera, there is a Dunsparce and a Manaphy in this list. Those are 2 popular tech cards in the meta right now, and for any Arceus deck, really. And so if you're afraid of Urshifu, Zapdos, or any other sniping deck that may be going on, those are 2 cards that you definitely include in your list. But other things that came around on this list in terms of this Arceus list, a couple things that I want to talk about. One, Path to the Peak. There was only 1 Path to the Peak card in this list still being viable. And for anyone who doesn't know, Path to the Peak, if you play that card, there's basically 2 reasons that you want to play that card. #1, you want to beat Mew VMAX. Mew VMAX is essential that it wants to draw. It wants to draw a ton of cards, and it can do that because of Genesect. You've heard this story. We've talked about this many times on this podcast. Path to the Peak shuts down Mew VMAX if the stadium sticks. And so with that, there's also another stadium that kind of counters Mew, but also kind of counters different decks like other Arceus decks as well, because, well, a lot of decks right now are playing the Sobble engine, the Inteleon Shading Dealings engine. And so, I mean, board states are packed, benches are packed. And so Collapse Stadium, if you do not know, is a stadium that puts both sides to 4 bench slots instead of 5. Collapse Stadium is a great counter card to Pokemon that are trying to use Sobbles, or maybe have different techs as well, like a Manaphy or Dunsparce or something that you can capitalize on. Maybe not specifically those cards, because well, if your opponent plays down Manaphy or Dunsparce against you and you're facing this deck, Matthew Burris's deck, I mean, you're kind of misplaying. So, but anyways, with Path to the Peak alongside shutting off Starbirth, the V-Star power of Arceus V-Star, very, very powerful. One of the couple reasons that Arceus V-Star is very, very good right now. This deck also plays a couple different cards, 2 cards to be exact, that we haven't really seen in the Arceus decks. And if, in my opinion, we were going to face, or we were going to talk about the inclusions of these cards, a lot of people would say play 4 of in the list. And that is Matthew Burris played 2 of Cross Switcher in this list. Now, Cross Switcher, if you do not know, is an item card that has an effect to where if you play 2 at the same time, your opponent switches their Pokemon, you know, you bring something into the active, sort of like a boss's orders, but then you also switch Pokemon as well. You choose what you bring into the active. It's basically like an escape rope, except you can choose what your opponent brings up. And so this is a very, very interesting card choice in my opinion. Now with Arceus, you can choose to play kind of a lot of different variants. You can choose to play a lot of different styles. You know, we've seen the Beedrills, we've seen Malamar VMAX, we've seen so many different variations of Arceus V-Star. And so deciding maybe instead of playing a lot of those different archetypes that maybe aren't as good as just the bread and butter regular Arceus V-Star Inteleon Shady Dealings deck, just going with the old stuff, and then instead of those extra things, just sliding in, you know, the Collapse Stadium, the Cross Switchers, the Echoing Horn as well. Echoing Horn works really, really well with the Cross Switchers in this deck because, well, if you can hit something in KO, and maybe it's like Mew VMAX or something like that. Let's just use that for an example. You know, you gust up a Mew VMAX or something, or I'm sorry, you take a KO on a Mew V, you know, 180 HP, can be KO'd very easily with just a double turbo energy on your Arceus. No need for the choice belt or quick shooting pings or anything like that. But anyways, you knock out a Mew V earlier in the game, it goes to the bench. And maybe you knock out, you know, a Genesect V another time, you know, you're using that boss's orders, or maybe you knocked out an Oricorio and a Meloetta or something of the sort. You can actually use Echoing Horn to bring back the Mew V and then cross switcher it basically for game, and to be able to have that flexibility and to not only use that in just that matchup specifically, but other matchups as well, can be so useful, especially because also you're playing Melanies in this list. My big head is covering up the Melanies, but there's 2 copies of that in this list. And I feel like, especially if you watch the Secaucus stream, there was a lot of times where people were using Shady Dealings Inteleon's attack. I can't remember exactly what it is, but essentially it is a water and colorless energy, costs 160 damage to the active, but it does 20 to the bench. So especially with Cross Switcher, you can use it to use a finishing move and only use 1 prize Pokemon yourself. It's just very, very flexible. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. So very, very cool that they won this. I mean, has a good matchup against Arceus Bees, even though you're playing special energy. So that was also very, very cool in my personal opinion to see that. And it's very hard to find the other lists of different things. Henry Brand, 6th place, former world champion, also played the exact set of 60 cards as Matthew Burris. They played the deck together, so very, very good deck, as you can see. But again, I mean, you got to be really, really good because, well, Henry Brand is a world champion player, and Matthew Burris is also a regional champion at the least. So very, very good. And mostly the other lists we don't actually really know about too much. The Malamar Inteleon is a pretty standard one that we've talked about in the past. I don't believe there was the Mew VMAX anywhere, so I can't really show you that, but I think pretty much the stuff here, except maybe that Stonejourner, is pretty standard to what we've seen in the past. But Now we are going to move on. We are going to talk about now the Lille regionals, or Lille regionals over in France. 367 players. Stefan Ivanov, a back-to-back reigning NAIC North American International champion, winning other events as well, like Lille. They've been doing great this season, in my personal opinion. Very, very cool to see them win this one. Very, very top player, and a bunch of other cool things as well inside this top 8. But of course, we got to talk about the winning list of the event. We got to talk about Stefan Ivanov's event. And if you want to talk about more details in the matchups and stuff about this deck, you can go check out his Twitter at Lubby. If you just type Stefan Ivanov, you're going to find it. He's a very, very influential person, and he actually made this article a free article on Channel Fireball that you can actually read about this if you want to learn more about this deck and you want to learn the intricacies and play this, because I really, really like this deck. Now, you may be looking at this and you may be thinking, Jake, this is a pretty standard, like Shady Dealings and Teleon, Moltres counter type deck. And you're right, except there's a couple other things in here. I talked about earlier how there was a lot of Shady Dealings being given out, and a lot of the Shady Dealings and Teleon's attacks as well coming into play at this event. And this deck plays a 1 of water energy, so it is exactly as that. People are using that as well, realizing that the 160 is actually pretty good math for a lot of things, especially setting up those knockouts for future attackers. This list does play 1 2-prize Pokemon. The rest are comprised of 1 prizers. That 2-prizer is Zapdos V, Galarian Zapdos V, which, as we know, very, very good against Arceus decks. Also pretty, I don't want to say autos you, but also is very, very good against Arceus variants that are in other combinations with other Vs. We'll talk about one of them later in this podcast, Charizard VMAX. There was actually a really, really good Charizard VMAX at one of the regionals, so I'll show you that list later in the podcast episode, but just really, really good at maximizing as well on that. And then you have your dark dudes, typical stuff, but the couple cards that I really, really like in this list, one, the Rowlet. The Rowlet, very, very good in here. This list plays 2 Bird Keepers, and so Bird Keeper, if you do not know, with the Darkness Ablaze Rowlet, Rowlet has an ability that if you use Bird Keeper in your turn, the attack cost is free. And so the attack of Rowlet, instead of costing 3 colorless energies, costs 0, and you can do a free, literal free 60 damage to an opponent's benched Pokemon. So very, very cool, very, very situational as well. And again, very, very good at doing setup damage as well for something like maybe your Galarian Moltres or your Galarian Zapdos, Hoopa, whatever it may be. But there are also some setup cards in terms of damage, including Leon. Sometimes in this format, you don't really get Marnie. You're not playing against Mew VMAX or something like that that plays a decent count of Marnie. And so your hand size is pretty big. You don't really have to do anything in terms of moving your hand, grabbing different things to progress your hand in your board state. So instead of grabbing, maybe the Professor's Research in here, or maybe the Raihan, you grab a Leon instead for your supporter per turn, and Leon gives you 30 extra damage on your opponent's active Pokemon. So very, very cool in my opinion, this Leon inclusion in this list. That allows you to have so much more flexibility. That may allow you, if your choice belt is prized, to be able to get that extra 30 damage. You can even use it in combination to get 60 extra damage in that turn. Your Inteleon now does 190 base damage with if you do not know, that KOs Mew, that KOs Genesect. Very, very cool. And especially with the choice belt as well, that 190 turns into quick math, 220, which knocks out an Arceus V. So very, very flexible, very, very cool, in my opinion, to include that Leon to get that extra damage in there. And then also you have that Galarian Zigzagoon as well to help get those numbers perfect in terms of the amount of damage. And then you also have inclusions like energy retrieval, allowing you to get 2 basic energies from the discard. It's basically like if you lost energies early, some dark energies early, and you want to utilize your Clara for both Pokemon and energies, but you don't have any Pokemon in your discard, well, you can use energy retrieval, and you can use that in combination with Sonia as well for your supporter for the turn. For Sonia to be able to grab the Galarian Moltres, and then also energy retrieval to grab your darkness energies from the discard. It also allows you to grab the different other one of energies that you may have utilized. So the one of energies in this list are the fighting energy and the water energy. And so again, we already talked about how the water energy could be so useful. And then also with Zapdos, I mean, that's the no-brainer in terms of the fighting energy. Zapdos V only needing 1 fighting energy to knock out a lot of Arceus decks. So very, very cool. Very, very good. Very, very interesting list that I absolutely love. I'm actually going to probably play with this in IRL. I mean, I have pretty much all the cards built except for one. I think I just don't have a bench barrier Manaphy for some odd reason. But anyways, very, very cool list. Congrats to Stefan Ivanov. But we got to move on. We got to talk about some more lists. We're going to talk about the second place list. And this is the one that a lot of people have been talking about. So I apologize to Andrew Mahone. You know, I had to pull this from his YouTube video because it's not easy to find the list. The list of the person who actually got second over at the Lille. Kai Vong Wen played Arceus Gyarados for second place. And this is going to kind of have a trend that I saw a lot of at Secaucus. And I'm apologizing not because I took the screenshot from his video, but because the screenshot is absolutely a goofy face from him. I mean, I love Andrew. He's a great guy. He's a great content creator, but I just think it's really funny if you're watching this on the YouTube or the Spotify version of the podcast. But anyways, this is an Arceus deck, you know, Arceus Gyarados VMAX. Now, this might not be the exact same list that was played at Lille, but we can assume that it's probably pretty close to what that was. But the biggest thing about this, the big thing that I want to talk about is the Jolteon in this and the inclusion of Memory Capsule as well. So Jolteon, if you do not know, it's a little baby Pokemon, evolves from Eevee. When it has a Memory Capsule attached to it, it has the ability to shut off water type Pokemon abilities. And so with that, it's a very, very cool Pokemon because Memory Capsule is something that you're playing in this list. Now, both players don't have abilities when it comes to the water Pokemon when a Memory Capsule is attached to Jolteon, so you probably don't want to play this if you're also playing an Inteleon engine. But shutting off Shady Dealings is a big deal, and it worked really, really well at Lille Regionals. And Jolteon, I mean, nobody's playing Tool Scrapper in this format. If you're playing Shady Dealings and Inteleon, you might want to start playing Tool Scrapper in this format, because there was another reason why they chose to play this combo, and it was Gyarados VMAX. Now, you may not even know what Gyarados VMAX does. If you're watching this, the video version, I've got Gyarados VMAX pulled up because off the top of my head, I actually don't know what it does. I got to refresh myself and look. Gyarados VMAX from Evolving Skies, 330 HP, water type Pokemon. I want to say it was a dragon type Pokemon, but that's not true. It's a water type Pokemon. But 330 HP, very high. I mean, it's kind of pretty high, you know. It's not 320, so gets you a little bit more out of range of Pokemon's attacks in the game as of right now. But anyways, Gyarados VMAX for water colorless. It does Hyper Beam, 120. Discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. That is very good right now in the Pokemon trading card game, especially when you talk about Urshifu decks and things like that. Think about it. You can hit an Urshifu for 120, right? Not knock it out, not activating something like Raihan or whatever, because a lot of them are not playing Melanies anymore. And you can basically guarantee that they're not going to be able to rapid flow next turn. You can do this with a lot of different decks as well. You know, you can knock off Fusion Strike energies off of Mew VMAX or different decks that, you know, Arceus decks. You can knock off a double turbo and things like that. And then next turn, you can finish them off by water, colorless, 4 energies in total. Max Tyrant doing just 240 damage, just a straight up vanilla 240 damage. So very, very cool as well. And I saw a lot of people also playing it with Gyarados V. So a big reason why Memory Capsule is included in this list as well and is utilized a lot more than just the Jolteon is because Gyarados V has a water colorless attack called Get Angry, 20 times for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So with Memory Capsule, again, you can use the attacks of the previous evolution, or I'm sorry, the previous cards before you evolve. So if you have a Gyarados VMAX in play, having a Memory Capsule means that you can use any of the attacks on the Gyarados V that you used before to evolve into Gyarados VMAX. And so on a Pokemon, again, that has 330 HP, 20 times is a lot. And Pokemon are very hard hitting in this format. You know, we are in a kind of 2-shot meta, I feel like, at this point for a lot of decks, especially with Arceus decks as well. And so if somebody's 2-shotting you, they're probably doing about 160 to 200 damage. And so 20 times that, 160 means 320 damage that you can reply with for a water colorless energy, which, by the way, you're playing a Melanie in this list and you have Arceus turboing all of these energies onto Gyarados. So very, very easy to fill that cost of the attack. Or 200. If you have 200 damage on you, then you can do 400 damage total. So again, very, very good in my opinion. Very, very cool as well. A deck that we haven't really seen a lot of. I bet Mellow Magikarp really likes this list. Kevin Clemente, because, well, he's a big Magikarp fan and he likes Gyarados. So very, very cool to see this list excel again. Super shout out to Kai Vong Wen. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, for getting second place overall with that list. But that's not all. We got to keep going in terms of the other lists that were there. And Stephen Ken, another content creator in the Pokemon trading card game, actually got top 8 as well at Lille Regionals with Arceus Duraludon, a deck that we probably haven't thought about a lot in this, well, I guess last couple weeks. And so looking at this list real quick, a lot of this is kind of what, you know, we thought of originally with Arceus Duraludon. I believe it was Riley Munner that had this idea and did it at the Brilliant Stars event at Full Grip Games. But Arceus and Duraludon, you're playing a 4-2 Arceus line. Interesting that it's 4-2. I would have thought it was 3-2, but again, we'll talk about that here in a second. And then a 2-3 line of Duraludon VMAX, single strike Duraludon VMAX. So very, very interesting. Again, a 2-3 and then also a 4-2 Arceus line. But I believe we talked about this when Riley did it, and it makes perfect sense. You actually, in this deck, want your starter to almost 100% of the time, or as close as you can, at least reasonably. You want your starter as many times as possible to be Arceus V, because if you look at the rest of this, you know, your switch cards are Escape Rope and Switch, and especially your first turn of the game, you really want to get an Arceus out, and you really want to attach an energy to it. Now, whether that is, you know, getting the Trinity Nova off because you're going second, which is a very, very awesome thing that Arceus definitely wants to do, or you're just using the first attachment, Again, you really want your Arceus V to be the one attacking first, because moving this Duraludon is very tough. So that's why you play more Arceus V than Duraludon. So statistically speaking, more often than not, you're going to be starting your Arceus V. There are a couple things in this list that are very cool. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with Arceus Gengar VMAX, the use of Hyper Potions, Hyper Potion healing 120 damage, an item card doing that healing on your Pokemon, and you take off 2 energies as a cost of doing that healing. Works great with double turbo energies. That's why it was so cool in the Arceus Gengar list that we saw several weeks ago. And so taking that idea and putting that in Duraludon, a Pokemon with, I believe, 330 HP as well, but doesn't have a weakness. It's a dragon type Pokemon, and the new dragon type Pokemon in the Pokemon trading card game don't have a weakness because, well, Fairy just doesn't exist anymore in the Pokemon trading card game. So very cool of that idea. You can almost guarantee, especially with the big charm that Stefan Kent played, you can almost guarantee that your Duraludon is not getting one shot. And so using that to your advantage and really just hacking away at your opponent's Pokemon. Very cool. Also, Rapid Strike, or I'm sorry, Single Strike Mustard, that one of in there to bypass the V if you're afraid of your Duraludon V getting sniped by a Meloetta, Mew V Max, Arceus V even. You can use Single Strike Mustard to just put the Duraludon VMAX onto your bench, and then you can accelerate onto it. So very cool in my personal opinion. Also playing for Tower of Darkness, going with the Tower of Darkness as your stadium because, well, you don't want to turn off your Starbirth for the most part, although it's really cool to turn off your opponent's Starbirth. But Duraludon V and Duraludon VMAX both have abilities in this list that are actually pretty useful. So Duraludon V having the ability to prevent 30 damage on it in the active. So especially when I was talking about your opponent bringing up and sniping your Duraludon V, if you have a Path to the Peak in play, you know, it's much easier to KO that Duraludon, but without the Path, it's a little bit harder. It effectively has 250 HP as a V Pokemon. And then Duraludon VMAX, if your opponent's Pokemon has any special energy attached to it, it cannot hit for damage, I believe. I think it could do effects like poison, confusion, all that stuff, but that's not relevant even if that is the case in the Pokemon trading card game right now. So being able to do that when special energy is running rampant in Arceus decks, you know, double turbo is played pretty much everywhere. You have also Mew VMAX as well. We're just going to keep talking about that card. It's a very good card. Not only are they playing the 4 Fusion Strike energies, because why wouldn't they? Meloetta is so good, but also, you know, they play double turbos too. So with just that alone, and not even thinking about the Urshifu, Rapid Strike Urshifu decks that play the fighting one, the double Rapid Strike energy, where you know which one I'm talking about, that one. There are so many special energies running around in the format, so it's a really cool deck that did well. Now, I don't know if it's going to stay well. This seems to me like one of the surprise decks, you know, the deck that you take because you don't think anybody's going to expect it, and it does really well, and then after that, it's pretty much donezo because now people are afraid of it at that kind of point. So great meta call by Stefan Kent to play this. Excellent job getting this excellent top 8 finish, and hopefully more events go well for them in the near future. And looking at kind of the rest of this top 8 in the Lille regionals, you know, not only just top 8 having a Ice Rider Calyrex. I know that's kind of made a little bit of noise, a little bit of comeback, some content creators playing that. I saw the last 24 or so hours testing out this deck, trying to see if it works, and a lot of birds, a lot of Galarian Moltres, especially in your top 5. In the top 5, wait, 5? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 5. 4 of the top 5 included Galarian Moltres. Now, I don't exactly know if the Arceus Moltres is like the small Moltres or the big Moltres, but it could be a mix of both. But it's good. Moltres is good right now because Mew is so popular. Mew is so good. There's a little Whimsicott as well. Tim Bartels, shout outs to you for getting Whimsicott in the top 16. And there were a couple other decks as well. Amber Watson playing the Malamar VMAX. We've talked a little bit about that in the past on the pod. Rapid Strike Urshifu getting 12th. So not totally out of the count yet, but definitely not in its high streak that it was prior, but very, very cool. Lots of great lists in this event. And then the biggest event of the weekend, Secaucus Regionals. Now, this was really interesting because we don't actually have the winning list. Luke Smith has not posted the winning list and it hasn't been shown anywhere. Although we could probably rewatch the VOD and build the deck. I'll just tell you what it was right now. Luke Smith got first place with Arceus Crobat VMAX, like kind of counter box deck, according to Pokey Stats. It had Bibarel in it as well. Bibarel, an incredible draw engine in the Pokemon trading card game, and is only going to get stronger and stronger in my opinion. But this top 8 right here, either you played Arceus or you played Mew VMAX. 5 of them being Arceus decks, Arceus variants, 1 Beedrill, 1 Crobat VMAX, and then the rest of them Arceus and Teleon, and then Mew VMAX just kind of being Mew VMAX. You know, this is the same deck that it's always been. Now, Parker Lish did play an Arceus Crobat list, as you can see here. But it's not the same because it doesn't have Bibarel in it. It has a little bit of different things in here. It chose to play Lumineon V, Hoopa V as well, and then the couple different tech choices of Pumpkaboo, Dunsparce, Oranguru as well. Sword and Shield base set Oranguru with the Primate Wisdom ability allows you to switch one card in your hand with the top card of your deck. Kind of making a comeback, but something that I've seen now, something that I saw in Secaucus, there are a couple things that I want to point out in this list that you're actually going to see in a couple different lists that we'll show off here in the rest of this podcast. Big Parasol has made its way into decks. Yes, the birds and the bees, especially the bees, people are starting to be afraid of the bees. And if you do not know, Beedrill's attack that we've talked about is an effect on the active Pokemon. It's not necessarily damage being dealt on the active Pokemon. And so Big Parasol, if you do not know, if you do not remember it from when Decidueye was around and a meta deck that people were playing, Big Parasol is a tool card that prevents the effects of a Pokemon's attacks on your active and also your bench. But it has to be in the active for this to work. And so, especially, you know, with special energies running around and Beedrill knocking out those Pokemon with special energies, Big Parasol is really, really good to protect your Pokemon that have those special energies. So, for instance, if you have an Arceus V-Star with a double turbo energy, which you probably do, Big Parasol is a really, really good card to get to put on your Arceus V, because like I said earlier, nobody's playing Tool Scrapper in this format. So your Big Parasol is pretty much safe. And so then you prevent a Beedrill from coming in and just knocking you out right away. They got to do a little bit more to muster up the automatic KO on your Pokemon with special energy. And so very, very cool. I mean, aside from the ones that I mentioned, the Lumineon, the Hoopa, the Oranguru, Pumpkaboo, it's probably around what the winning list was with Luke Smith. Again, you'd have to go in Pokemon's VOD and rewatch and look at all the cards and carefully take notes of all the cards that he had. But anyways, the other card that I want to talk about that has made its way into different lists that we saw at Secaucus especially was Fan of Waves, especially in Arceus decks. A lot of Arceus decks played Fan of Waves, and it proved to be really, really good because especially if you found that Fan of Waves early, especially against opposing Arceus V decks, you can really put your opponent back a step because especially if you're playing against Arceus V decks, they're probably playing double turbos. And you can use this for other ones as well. Mention Mew VMAX, playing the Fusion Strike energies. You can take away one of those energies to kind of minimize Meloetta's effectiveness, but also maybe force your opponent to find another energy for their Mew VMAX or something of the sort. And then maybe any others that you may find, including the Rapid Strike Urshifu list that we saw. And so very, very cool to see. Some people played 1 Fan of Waves. Some people played 3 Fan of Waves, as you're seeing in the 9th place list from this player. And very, very cool in my personal opinion. Good job to Parker Lish for piloting this. And then, I mean, they played Crushing Hammers as well, which, I mean, I won't talk too much about the Crushing Hammers because it's Crushing Hammers. But anyways, Peter Joltik got 2nd place with the B-Drill deck, as I mentioned earlier. Arceus Bees, even though I didn't win, it's still a pretty good deck, and it was kind of unfortunate because it wasn't really a good finals match to watch. I tweeted, some of you may have seen my tweet about this, but it was probably the worst Pokemon Regional Championship match I've ever watched. Now, nothing against Peter. Fantastic player. Very, very good player for a very, very long time. But he just did not draw anything when it came to the game that they were playing. He barely got to play Pokemon, and so I mean, Luke Smith just really ran all over him in the game, and there was really not much that Peter could do. But anyways, looking at this list, very, very cool list, including 3 different types of energies in this list. Big reason why there's multiple training courts in this list and no path to the peak. The 3 different energy types, 4 dark energies. I believe they're dark. Yeah, dark energies. You have 2 grass type energies. I'm starting to mix my colors up. 2 grass type energies and 1 fighting type energy. And with that, it's curious. You may be able to assume, if you're just listening to the podcast, what exactly that may be. And let me tell you right now, there's no Galarian Moltres in this list. This lists dark Pokemon. The reason that there's dark energies is Hoopa V, because Hoopa hitting both dark and psychic type weakness, so being able to knock out any of the Mew VMAXs out there, being able to knock out any of the Rapid Strike Urshifus out there, and then Galarian Zapdos V as well in this list, as we've talked about already. You know why it's good if you've been listening to the podcast. Playing a couple different Bs, playing some Marnie's, Research Boss, Sharon's Care. Typical stuff when you talk about the B-Drill list that we've talked about in the past, especially as a Bradner's list. So very, very cool to include the Hoopa V. I think it's a very, very good choice. Very, very interesting choice as well. And not too much, in my personal opinion, outside of this list. It's playing the 4-3-1 Sobble Shady Dealings line. So utilizing the Shady Dealings as well. No water energy in this list. Water energy could have been interesting, but I think Peter found way more value in the 3 of Hoopa, Zapdos, and Arceus V-Star, providing enough coverage. Oh, and then B-Drill as well. So those different types of attackers providing enough coverage that you didn't really need the setup damage of Inteleon, you know, another energy type, going 4 different energy types before you even count the double turbos, which I guess is technically 5 different energy types in this list. Played a couple scoop up nets, played Big Charm, Air Balloon, being able to find anything that you need and being able to find whatever you got going on in this deck. I believe plays 1 energy search. I believe that's what this old e-reader card is right here. Do not know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's a energy search art. Very, very good, especially for finding your grass or fighting type energies, or even a dark type energy. to be able to utilize. But we got to talk a little bit more, and let's talk about Mew VMAX. So Mew VMAX, Vincent Gillette getting 4th in this list. And so looking at this list, pretty standard for the most part in terms of your Mew VMAX list. You know, playing the Meloes, playing a couple Mews in terms of the VMAX, playing 4 of Genesect and Mew, playing a lot of Sparkles, playing a lot of Boss, but playing less Boss to be able to Pokemon Catcher. So we've seen Pokemon Catcher appear and disappear in these lists. This is no exception. Going in right there, playing 1 Fog Crystal, which I find to be really, really cool because, well, you're playing the basic energy types. You're playing the basic energies, but that's not all you're doing to prevent Beedrills or, I guess, Duraludon. I mean, they probably didn't prepare for Duraludon, but could have worked against Stephen Kent. Big Parasol also made its way in Mew list, just like it did with Arceus. And so this helping out Vincent a lot in terms of how they were able to combat the Beedrills and whatnot. But the one thing that I don't like as much about Big Parasol in Mew decks as I do in Arceus decks. Arceus, the way that you find the Big Parasol is you use your Shady Dealings in Teleon. Mew VMAX doesn't really have anything like that in this list. Now, it does have the 4 of Cramomatic. I will give it that. And it has the draw potential to go 1,000,000 miles in a single turn, drawing so many different cards in your deck. But, I mean, with Shady Dealings and Teleon, it's much, much easier to be able to find that Big Parasol, no matter what you say about the draw power or the Cramomatics, because, well, Cramomatic only works statistically 50% of the time. And so even if you flip all 4 Cramomatics in one single turn, there's still statistically a chance, if Big Parasol's in your deck, of course, there's still statistically a chance that you flip tails on all 4 of those. Whereas Drizzile guarantees, or Inteleon guarantees, that if your Big Parasol's in your deck, you're 100% going to be able to pull out that card and find it to protect your Pokemon. So very, very cool that it included it, although I don't know if I like it as much as I do the Inteleon decks. Also plays in Old Cemetery kind of appearing back in Mew VMAX decks. If you attach a non-psychic energy to your Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on it, and that goes for, I believe, both you and your opponent. So very, very interesting. But I think the one that most people want to talk about in terms of the decks is another one that people didn't really expect. There was a little bit of noise, I will say, in terms of the different decks, especially ones that you compare Arceus with. But James Arnold, or Wames Games, over at Card Trooper Games, piloted Charizard VMAX to a beautiful 17th finish at Secaucus Regionals. Now, we've seen in the past, you know, Charizard V-Star be included in Charizard VMAX list, but Wayne's Games really feeling like Charizard V-Star was not worth it. And you know what? I don't really blame him, looking at the list and watching his stream game especially, because most of the time you're going to be using Starbirth for your V-Star power, because Starbirth is so good and Starbirth is so powerful. It's almost as good as ADP's GX power, if you know what I'm talking about and referring to. I don't know if it's that powerful, but it's pretty doggone powerful. It definitely compares to that. Although I don't know if it's as annoying as ADP's. But anyways, moving on. Charizard V-Star playing a 3-2 line of that and a 4-3 line of Arceus V-Star, because again, you are always going to want to start out with Arceus V-Star and then use that to power up Charizard V and V-Star as your follow-up Pokemon. So playing 2 Crobats, 1 Lumineon in this list. Also a little baby Zigzagoon to maybe get that 1 more damage ping that you needed, whether that's for Arceus V-Star's attack or for Charizard V-Star's attack. The Galarian Zigzagoon can come in handy, although no way to scoop it up if it becomes your active Pokemon or if you use it and want to use it again. But very, very cool list in here as well. Playing 4 Magma Basins, 2 Choice Belts, an Echoing Horn as well. Echoing Horn, we've talked about how good it is in combination with the 4 Boss's Orders in this list, especially with Lumineon V, being able to find a supporter at any point as long as there's not like a path to the peak in play. Playing double turbos, playing fire energy, very, very cool list, especially for those of you that do have Charizard VMAX. And I actually do have Charizard VMAX, so I don't know, maybe if I get my hands on some Arceus, maybe I play this deck. I don't know. That would be kind of cool. I do have to get my Arceus, though, in order to play this deck, which, let me tell you, the way that Arceus is good right now and the way that it's kind of expensive still. Actually, how much is Arceus V-Star right now? At the time that I would have considered buying it, it was pretty expensive. It was like $22+ a pop. Yeah. Almost $30 now a pop. You might as well get the rainbow rares, so then you can at least save the rainbow rares for later in life when you sell the cards. It might be worth a little bit more, but anyways, that is the deck list that I'll showcase for this. But talking about the rest of the top 16, Justin Kim going 10-3-1 with Inteleon Rapid Strike VMAX. Very, very cool inclusion in the top 16s that we actually haven't seen yet at all. I know some people were playing around with it, especially in some American groups. There was a group playing around with it. And then Grant Manley as well. I don't have his list prepared. We're actually going to talk about it because it's kind of an interesting list. Playing Arceus V-Star Malamar VMAX with a little bit of a barrel, but like we talked about earlier, the inclusion of Jolteon, the little baby Jolteon, and the memory capsules. So very, very interesting. I don't know if Grant Manley played the memory capsule on the Malamar Vs as well, or if he just used it on the Jolteons. That'd be a very, very cool and interesting question to ask. He says the deck is really broken, and Sean, I know how he has Arceus V-Star and Malamar VMAX build. He was playing it in a webcam tournament, the Shuffle Squad webcam tournament the other week. So if he wants to keep playing it, I think it would be cool to play the Jolteon version of this list alongside it. Very, very cool. Plays several paths to the peaks as some Arceus decks do, obviously, and Malamar shutting off the rule box abilities and then putting a card at the bottom of your opponent's deck. Very, very cool, especially after you shut off Shady Dealings as well with Jolteon. So very, very cool. Thank you, Grant, for playing this, getting 10th overall at the regional. But there was a lot of other stuff as well. Again, go to PokeStats. If you do not know their website, PokeStats is great in terms of getting results. They have been, especially immediate results as well. They've been doing an excellent, excellent job with the different events that have been going on. So big shout outs to them and the people who run it, but also big shout outs to you for listening to the end of the podcast, listening to me rant, talk about different decks. Hopefully you got a lot, hopefully you learned a lot, and hopefully you got some decks that you want to build. I will say, if you've made it this far, I'll give you a little bit of sneak peek as to what's coming over on the Metapod podcast. Jake from the Metapod podcast will more than likely, I mean, I guess some things could happen, but more than likely, I will be at Full Group Games on Sunday. They are doing their Astral Radiance weekend event. And although I can't be there Saturday because I'm actually in a work trip in Northern Ohio starting Wednesday, and then I leave on Saturday, but leaving on Saturday and having family that also stays in Ohio, I'm actually going to be more than likely, hopefully, I will most likely be at the GLC event, playing GLC for the Full Grip event, the Gym Leader Challenge format, if you do not know. So if you're in Akron, Ohio, or are you planning on going to Full Grip for that event, look for me. I mean, I'll say on Twitter if I can go or not, and then also I'll post on the Metapod Twitter as well as my personal. So look for me. I mean, I look like this if you're watching the video version. If you're not watching the video version, I'm a pretty average white guy, I guess. I mean, I'm like 5'8". I've got a little bit of facial hair. I'm usually wearing a hat. And I mean, yeah, I've got glasses, so look for that. I'm sure that doesn't narrow it down at all. But anyways, I will also be at the North American International Championships. I signed up for that. I got an entry for the North American International Championships. Now I just got to remember how to play Pokemon, the card game, but I'll figure it out. And so if you also plan on going to the North American International Championships, I believe next month in Columbus, Ohio, make sure to please say hi. Sean and I are going to try to get something going in terms of something that I can give out to people, like a Metapod sticker or something like that. I don't actually know. Maybe I'll be giving out Rowlet cards. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to find as many Metapod cards as I can and sign them and give them to you all. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to the Metapod podcast, Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. I'm Jake. Sean is not here, but he'll be back soon. Probably, hopefully he feels better soon. And stay tuned on YouTube because we're going to have another extra video coming soon. I don't know exactly when because the package might arrive tonight, might arrive tomorrow. But anyways, have a great rest of the day and hope to hear from you again soon and hope to see you listening to how the meta has evolved around the evolving meta. Bye.